meeting for the Simsbury Planning Commission. Please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll now take the roll. Just so everyone knows, we do have 6 regular members that are elected to this commission, as well as 3 alternate members. And our bylaws state that we need a minimum of 4 commissioners present to have a quorum. So even though we don't have 6 tonight, we do have 5, so we will have a quorum. Holly Bem.
Here.
Robert Kulikowski, absent. Aaron Levitt-Smith.
Here.
Ron Lacandro. Alan Needham.
Here.
William Rice, present. Elizabeth Burt. Mark Drake. Gary Lungarini. Okay, we do have 5 commissioners. There's no need to appoint an alternate to a regular position. Okay. Next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the June 14th meeting. In the absence of our secretary, Mr. Kulikowski, I will take us through the minutes. So, referring to the Planning Commission minutes, June 14th, 2016, are there any comments or changes necessary to page number 1?
No.
Page number 2?
No.
Page number 3? Okay, I have one here. Janice, if you could please, on line 113, where you refer to Mr. Lou Wise. I think his name is Lewis, Lewis. So we can change LOU to LEWIS. Then also, line 118, and Mr. Rabbit, you're going to have to give me a little help here. The minutes read, the applicant's letter also agreed to a 35-day extension of time within which to close the public hearing. The additional 30-day extension brings it to the statutory maximum of 65. So is the original extension 30 or 35?
I believe the original granted was 30 to get you to a subsequent meeting, and
Right.
they granted the additional 30.
So this should read 35 in both cases.
30 original,
Yeah.
and then 35 in their second letter, for a total of 65.
So Janice, when you wrote that, were you thinking it was two separate extensions?
Yes.
It is 2 separate extensions. The initial extension came in at your first public hearing.
Yeah.
Where they granted a 30-day extension.
Oh, so this
And
is
then
backwards.
subsequent to that, they gave a 35-day extension.
I think this is reversed.
Well, the applicant's letter did request 35
We
days.
can check that, Mr. Chairman.
I think maybe what it should read is instead
So
of
maybe
the
it should say
additional, it should
the
say
initial 30-day
in
extension
addition.
brings it
In
to...
addition to the initial 30-day.
Yeah, so change additional.
Thank you.
We can do it.
Did you get that, Jan?
She came up with it.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear it.
She got it.
Any other changes or comments on page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Page 7? Page 8? Page... Okay, Aaron?
Yep.
Page 9? With no further comments, I move that we accept the minutes as amended. So I made the motion, Ron seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Unanimous vote to the affirmative. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, reviewing Lou Wise's letter on June 10th, on May 10th, he agreed to a 35-day extension.
Oh, May 10th was 35.
And on June 10th, an additional 30 days. So we can.
Oh, okay, let's,
So instead of initial 30-day extension, we want to say
so the applicant's,
30-day extension on June 10th. That's what you want to do.
no, it's 35. 30 on May 10th, right? Mr.
35 initially,
30, oh,
35.
Well, maybe if we put dates with each one.
yeah.
on May 10th, Mr. Wise consented to a 35-day extension.
Okay.
And on June 10th, the commission acted to grant an additional 30 days.
Just date them.
The dates.
Okay, good, we got that. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. Taking up old business, we have an open public hearing on application number 16-01 of Mansour Prime Properties LLC, agent Royce Palmer, owner, for a 23-lot affordable housing subdivision under CGS 8-30G on the property located at 80 Climax Road. Okay, so this is a continuing public hearing. I am in receipt of a letter from the applicant. Okay, from Louis K. Wise. Dear Commission members, as explained in my letter to the Commission dated June 10th, 2016, the applicant is in the process of making significant modifications to the subdivision plans, which are the subject of this application in response to the many issues raised by the town staff. These modifications will not be completed in time for the meeting on June 28th, 2016. Moreover, it is doubtful that there will be enough time to complete these plans, have them reviewed by town staff, and meet again with town staff before the Commission's following meeting on July 12th, 2016. As a consequence, the applicant respectfully requests that the hearing be continued from June 28th, 2016 to July 26th, 2016. Because of the applicant's previous consents to extend the time within which the hearing must be closed, the deadline to close the hearing is August 17th, 2016. Mr. Rabbit, you have any comments to this correspondence?
Again, with regards to the extension request under state statute, you had 35 days to close the hearing. The applicant has consented to an additional 65 days, so you have a total of 100 days, which takes you to the middle of August, as referenced in Mr. Wise's letter. It would be staff's opinion, given the nature of this application and the complicated aspects associated with some of the development of these lots, that the commission continue the public hearing to your July 26th meeting.
I have a question then. What if at that meeting we can't make a decision, then we have to come back and...
Once the hearing is, July 26th is your regularly scheduled meeting. Under statute, once the hearing is closed, the commission has 65 days to make a decision.
Okay.
After the hearing is closed, you have to make your decision based on the public record, as submitted by the applicant and as testified by the public. But once the hearing's closed, you still have access to your staff. Engineering, legal, planning, who you need.
But no further
But
testimony
it's
can be
based
entered.
on that record
Yeah.
up to that date from when the hearing is closed.
So we would have to close the hearing at the end of July?
Unless you schedule a special meeting,
Yeah.
you would, in all likelihood, close your meeting in July, and staff has explained that to the applicant, that you do not have a scheduled meeting in August.
So how many days would it be, how many days would the extension be to that meeting?
To that meeting,
From today?
again, subtracting 17 days plus another 4, You're on 20, 21 days.
So that would be taken away from the total allotment of 100 that we have.
He consented to an extension of 65 for the hearing. We
Right.
could request, if you close that hearing, to consent to the potential extension of the decision time.
So the July date is within the 65 that he has?
Yes.
Okay.
That July date gives you sufficient time to close it within the statutory timeframe of 100 days with the extensions.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Jamie's assessment, except that we have a lot of people who have shown up, I think, to have to enter public comment. And so I think that although we tabled discussion on this topic, we ought to let everyone talk.
The discussion about that last time, I don't have a problem with that, but centered on that if you want your comments heard by the other side, that you may consider the other side, you might want to wait until they're present. I have a suggestion. I'm sympathetic to the notion of coming to a meeting only to find out it's continued. So I've given that some thought, and I think there's a pretty simple solution. If whoever's concerned about that, if amongst yourselves you circulate an email list and you put somebody in charge of that, you can have one person call the town just before the meeting or whatever time frame they suggest, just one person. Find out, is it continued, is it not, and then you can spread that word amongst yourselves.
I know, Alan, that at least one person has visited the planning department, okay, to look at the record and try to understand what's been submitted, and they were made aware of the letter from the attorney, okay?
That's fine.
They subsequently posted that on social media,
Oh, that I didn't know.
Yeah.
okay? So,
And it was in the paper too.
I know it's not universal that everyone subscribes to, I think it was the Simsbury Economic Development
Right.
Facebook page, but it's an open, I think it's an open page, or it's easy enough to join. I joined. A long time ago. Okay, so, Holly, I agree that we want to show a lot of respect for the public. So if there is someone in the audience that wants to make a statement or a comment regarding the application we just discussed, please come up to the podium, state your name and your address, and make your comments. And please understand that there's been quite a bit of testimony over the past couple of meetings, so you can repeat something that's said at the risk of maybe souring the commissioners.
Say what you want to say.
Is there a microphone that normally is there for SCTV? Because I don't see it here tonight
The SCTV has done a good job picking up
off of these.
off of those.
So,
Even if someone doesn't code it.
But we're not. Oh, I didn't see the.
yeah, so anyone is welcome to come up.
Oh.
Of course, my comment was in jest.
I'm just telling my purpose.
Okay.
Well, I'm an attorney, I'll come up, I can avoid the podium. Ryan Carpy, 10 Wheeler Road, Simsbury. I would like to point out that I predicted this last time.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I remember.
So it's going to keep continuing. I understand the time frame, but this is all smoke and mirrors. This is exactly what personally I would do and legally I have done to get things into the court when I didn't want particular people to hear the arguments. It's a common tactic. So I predicted this, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next time. But the last comment is, this is all smoke and mirrors. They want to put a big development in, we want the workforce affordable housing. Then let them put 4 houses of workforce affordable housing. Then 100% of their development is workforce affordable housing, and we help the town. The rest of it's smoke and mirrors. They want a huge development, that's all. This is entirely what this is about. They want to bully this commission, they want to bully the town into approving.
Thank you.
Well, when's the next court date?
It's not gonna advertise.
I know, it's habit, you know, Your Honor.
Well, our next regularly scheduled meeting is the 12th of July, but the request for extension is to the 26th of July, our second regularly scheduled meeting.
I hope we're still available, not on vacation. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Richard Case, attorney from Avon, representing Allwood Properties. Our only request is similar what the commission asked the applicant to please produce all of their reports, plans, etc., at least 7, we think closer to 10 days prior, so the staff has an opportunity to, and our experts have an opportunity to review. And if you can make that request to the applicant.
So,
It's
Mr.
important,
Rabbit.
it's important, because otherwise if it appears the day before, we don't have an opportunity.
Understood. But I know you realize that testimony can be delivered the day of the meeting, but if we could make a request of the applicant to share all their information at least 7 days.
In a timely manner.
7 days, be good.
7 days before the hearing of which I expect is going to be on the 26th.
Correct.
If they do it on the 12th, they will never have it done by then. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Should I make another prediction? Been there.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I guess that's enough, or that's who wanted to make comments? No other comments, fine. Okay, so, I'm looking for a motion.
Wait, is everyone done?
I don't see anyone else coming up, Holly.
I'll go.
Oh, okay.
I'm not an attorney, Cameron Cantomo, 46 Sunset Hill Road. Going on UConn next year, so that's pretty exciting, but
It's another deal.
it's ingenious what they're doing. They're putting 23 houses on a really small lot, using the guise of affordable housing as basically a veil to only put up, I believe it was like 4 houses that will actually be affordable. Now I haven't read the state law entirely, but I feel like there should be some kind of exception made to this affordable housing if a certain percentage of the houses aren't actually affordable. Like, as previous speakers have said, if it was all 3 houses or 4 houses, or even if all 23 houses were affordable, I think people would be a lot less upset about this. But the fact that so many houses are being priced at even higher than the surrounding properties, it's a bit ridiculous and kind of a slight on the Simsbury community. So that's just all I was just speaking.
Thank you.
Cameron, do you mind just spelling your last name for
Cantel, and like Mary O.
Of course, this law is written at the state level, so both are representative and state senator are up for re-election this fall. In their power to do something about it.
Anyone else who wish to express their feelings? So we'll, I'm looking for a motion to either accept or not accept the applicant's extension.
I would move that we accept the applicant's request for an extension.
And keep the public hearing open.
Keep the public hearing open to July 26th.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Rabbit?
Just clearly in the motion, if it can state the place and time.
Okay. So it'll be here. You want to amend it?
In this room. Okay. In
Main
addition,
meeting
in the main meeting room at Simsbury Town Hall at 7 o'clock.
There's no other larger...
We are working on that.
I don't think so.
Okay, any other discussion?
I just had a question.
Sure.
Going back to if Attorney Case, was it? I'm sorry. his request, because let's just say it comes to the hearing date and they haven't gotten anything in, and there are people who have hired lawyers to be able to get their own experts. I would want those people to have their day before us and to be able to review the material. So what if? And I hate to ask what if, but I just want to be prepared, because I'm nervous about that, because this is going on an extension, people have come, and I want them to get it right, but I also want the public to be able to refute or not refute, or be able to review and have time, and that's not fair to them to not, be given their due time to be able to.
Again, my understanding as a planner, not as legal counsel, I'll make that clear. The applicant has the ability to submit information up to the moment the hearing is closed. If the public is there, or the public has consultants, they are allowed to be in the room and react to the information submitted that evening up until the hearing is closed. So I have been involved historically in applications, not all 830G, just general applications, where applicants have submitted things very late in the evening under appeal. One of the arguments with my consultant was my engineer wasn't there from an abutter, and basically the judge says, well, you had an opportunity to have your team available at that hearing where they could listen to the information, review the information, and submit comments. It's a difficult process, but the courts, to me, are relatively clear. You can submit information up to the close of the hearing, and someone can react to that submission of information up until the close of the hearing. Once the hearing's closed, you only have access to staff.
So would we be able to, I'm just scenario, so what if on the last week of July, the 26th or whatever day, would we, as a commission, be able to keep the hearing open, let's say for a week, for their experts to take a look and come back?
If you scheduled a special meeting.
Yes. Okay, all right.
So the time really runs out on the 17th of August.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to be sure that we
all in
could.
August, since
What was that?
we have no scheduled meetings. so.
Right. But we would have the ability to do that. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we have that option.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the request for an extension and continuing the public hearing until July 26th. So, any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay? Say nay. Any abstentions?
Me.
Okay. So, Holly abstained and the rest voted aye. Okay, that public hearing will remain open. Okay, next, we have no new applications. However, we do have a referral. Those of you who are, just give a minute, move out.
No offense when you came up to the table, right? Don't take it personally.
I can't believe this crowd isn't here for a text amendment without an LED sign.
We thought they were here just for that.
Nothing else to do.
Okay, next item on our agenda is a referral, CGS 8-3A referral to the, it's from the Zoning Commission, on Zoning Commission application number 16-32 of Cumberland Farms Incorporated, applicant Joseph P. Williams Esquire, Shipman and Goodwin LLP agent, for text amendments to the Simsbury zoning regulations in Article 10, Section Section C.3.H, and Article 10, Section C-7-D, to permit owners of certain gasoline filling stations to replace their existing manually updated price signs set atop the gas pumps with identically sized LED pumped toppers. Okay, so do we have the applicant or their agent?
Yes, you do.
Mr. Chairman, just before we go, please understand this is a referral from zoning. This isn't an application by the applicant to you this evening. So zoning referred it to you under 8-3A. 23A.
Yeah.
For finding a consistency with the POCD. I believe Mr. Williams is here representing Cumberland Farms to talk to,
Answer your
not the
question.
zoning change.
Yeah.
Consistency associated with your POCD. That's your role tonight.
Is that clear for everyone? Okay, Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to see you all. I'm Joe Williams with Shipman and Goodwin in Hartford, and I have the privilege of representing Cumberland Farms on land use applications all over the state of Connecticut. I don't have a formal presentation or anything. Jamie's right. It's a referral to you from the Zoning Commission to report back to the Zoning Commission on whether you believe our requested amendment to the zoning regulations is consistent with your plan of conservation and development. We believe that it is. But just a little background for a second, and let me start by just checking on what you all have, so I'm not too redundant. But were you all given a copy of the cover letter I submitted and the text of the zoning regulation?
Yes.
You have that? Okay. All right. So, let me start by saying Cumberland Farms, if you don't know them, they're a great company, family-owned, based in Massachusetts. They're very serious and committed to their New England roots, especially when it comes to being sensitive to their communities and being a good neighbor and not causing unwanted impacts in the towns in which they operate. And I hope everyone has had a chance to see the Cumberland Farms location at 155 Hot Meadow Street that opened a few years ago. I forget how many it is, but it's not terribly old. And as you can see, they're using, in all their stores from Cape Cod to Maine, throughout all of New England and all of Connecticut, they're using a colonial farmhouse style of architecture so that you don't have your typical convenience store that you are looking at. That store, like most gas stations, have little signs on top of the gas pumps that tell you the price of the gas for each grade. And a little bit about state law that you probably never wanted to know anything about is that the State Department of Consumer Protection regulates the sale of gasoline, and it regulates very strictly how you can display gasoline, and it actually requires those signs on top of the pumps. So any gas station operator has to show the price for each grade of gasoline that's coming out of the pump. And for time immemorial, the state regulation said that those little signs, it tells you exactly what size the sign can be, it tells you what size the numbers can be. The regulation, which is section 16A-15-9, which I think I referenced in my letter. That section of the regulations always said you can either have black numbering on a white background, or you can have white numbering on a black background, the opposite. And it actually gives a little picture. It shows in the regulation this kind of thing, which shows you what the numbers are supposed to look like. Well, last October, the Department of Consumer Protection amended their regulation, and they added this little guy right here, and text within the regulation saying that these price displays can be LED. And the state regulation actually says in there the LED numbering can be white, red, green, or yellow numbers. And Cumberland Farms has been changing over or trying to change over its manual, they're called pump toppers, the price signs atop the gas. Been trying to change over its pump topper signs, and it has been changing them over all around New England, all around the state of Connecticut, and they've been generally well received. They usually use red numbering. And this is actually the first town Cumberland's come into, and I had a number of discussions with Town Planner Rabbit over the last several months. He suggested, I'm not claiming he endorsed it, but he suggested that we might want to consider the idea of making the numbering white, just to be a little more consistent with a sort of colonial style. And we personally believe it probably makes the numbering on the LED pump topper less noticeable because there's all kinds of white around it. And that's what we agreed to do. So in the text amendment that we have proposed to zoning, that's on referral to you, we proposed that the LED numbering can be white only. Another thing I want to emphasize is that we try to, and I think you have the text of it in front of you, forgive me for jumping around, just to turn to the text that we're proposing. The key portion is on the second page. That's Article 10, Section C, 3H. We tried to build in a number of limitations. The first is to say This regulation does not, and we have no desire to make LED signs of any kind or every kind allowable in the town of Simsbury. In fact, the reason I gave you the background on these LED, on the pump toppers, is that they're not a sign from the perspective of Cumberland Farms that's trying to advertise or to draw people into the site. They have that out in the front of the site. I'm sure you've seen it, and the company's able to, from headquarters, centrally update the prices on that sign. The big sign that's in the front, they call it the freestanding sign at the front of the site. That's the one that, of course, they want you to see while you're driving by. And the company's able to centrally update the digital display of the price that's in the middle on the little screen in the middle of the pump. They're not able to do that with the pump toppers, and that's one of the main reasons for this proposal, is because they're all manually changed. There's just a little magnetic rectangle that gets taken out and replaced. So the reason for this change is not really an advertising play. It's more to modernize the business, for the business just to be more efficient, because the prices can be updated more accurately and more quickly from a centralized computer location, and to be consistent with what it says on the other screen on the pump and what it says out front. And it's also for safety reasons as well, because somebody on the staff has to leave the store, has to go out there and walk through the travel lanes and be standing in the fueling area where somebody drives up with their car and has to manually change them out. So the state has allowed this change, and we're trying to do that in all of Cumberland Farms' existing locations, but we're trying to do it, to return to the text, we're trying to do it in as limited and unobtrusive a manner as possible. So our suggested limitations for this regulation are, one, that it can only happen in the planned area development zone, which will limit, hopefully, to commercial areas where this can be happening and have less impacts throughout the town. Two, that the signs have to comply with the state regulations, so it's coming only for gas price pump toppers and not any other kind of sign, and the size of them are strictly regulated. In fact, that's why we added in the no more than 2.25 square feet in surface area, because the little box that's on top of the pump is about 2.16 or something, so it allows a little bit of, it puts a round number in there, but, a very small sign, obviously 2.25 square feet. Surface area, it has to be, number 3, it has to be affixed to the top of fuel dispensers, so it has to be a gas pump topper. Fourth limitation we suggest is that the fuel dispensers have to be situated perpendicular to the road, meaning they're not facing the street. But like the Cumberland Farm Station here in Simsbury and all their new stations have, they're turned perpendicular to the road, so you pull your car up to it, which means they're sideways to the road. They're not being displayed as prominently to people who would be walking or driving by. And the intent of that, again, is to limit the visibility of it, because they're meant to be visible to somebody who's at the gas pump. They're not trying to advertise to people out on the street.
I'm sorry, are we allowed to?
Yep, please do.
Ask questions. See, I would have thought it the other way around. When I'm driving and you're going down the road, it's the perpendicular things you see. The things that are parallel to the road, you're going to crash if you're looking at.
I guess if you're at a good enough distance where you have the angle, you could see them. But they're small enough that, to me, it would be tough to see, and I really wouldn't recommend it, because you really have to train your vision off of your driving to be doing that, whereas the big sign has the price closer to the road, and that's, to me, that makes more sense. But I don't disagree that you can see them some from a distance to one side or the other. As you're passing in front, you won't see them, is more my point.
Well, only if you're passing in front and magically you turn around, which I don't do for safety reasons, but...
I wouldn't magically do any of those turns.
My other question is, there's a lot of subjective wording, because I launched my first LED sign display in 1986. A lot of intensity has changed in LEDs, and there's no subjective measurement of intensity. And as we all know, with today's cars and things, some of those LED lights are they can just burn into your retina. And that would be even a small one would be particularly noticeable, and you see it on the string of pumps. And so, do you have any subjective measurements of intensity?
Sure, and there's, with these things, there's subjective.
Objective.
There's objective too, so I'm glad you asked that. Because I think with the manufacturer, you kind of give them I've learned a lot about this, and I'm not the world's greatest expert, but there's numerical settings on the machine itself, and I actually have this to show you. Can I hand up pictures of this, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
What I'm showing you is actually the custom-made pump topper that Cumberland Farms had made for this application to propose to Simsbury, because like I said, they use red everywhere, so they had to go back to the manufacturer and ask them special, would you make a white one? And it's not done yet, but I am going to bring it to the public hearing before the zoning commission, but I just didn't have enough time for this. But you can see what it would look like with the black background and the white scale. It's not the scale, it looks large on the page, I know, but it's the same size as the pump topper that it would replace, which is 2 1/4 square feet.
And you had foot candles of this?
No, so let me complete that answer for you. The short answer is the brightness can be adjusted, and my understanding is if this text amendment were to be adopted by the zoning commission and go into effect, then we would come back to the town with a sign application. I'm assuming the town requires that to actually get the signs approved. So I intentionally put in some language that is meant to allow the commission and staff to address that issue, where at the end of that subsection I said, does not create glare or create a danger to vehicular traffic. I believe I took that from somewhere else in your regulations, if I'm remembering right. Because the bottom line is the intensity or the brightness can be adjusted. And Cumberland Farms has done that in towns that have expressed that concern. So they have a I don't have it in foot candles, I may be able to get that, but they just tell me that it's a 1 through 10 setting. So they have a default setting they get from the manufacturer, I believe it's a 6. And you can turn it down a couple notches basically and still be visible. So that would be something that we would present and show and talk about on the sign application. And this text is meant to allow for that discussion to happen and for us to be told about the brightness and the intensity.
Comments? They're going to wait for a motion.
Can I just say one last thing, Mr. Chairman? We believe it's consistent with your plan of conservation and development. I went through it, at least I tried to find relevant sections. I didn't see much in the POCD that's directly applicable, other than to say you do have a section on economic development, and you state goals in there for, on page 110, to retain, expand, and recruit businesses, encourage the town to establish and maintain positive relationships with local businesses, and promote policies that will lead to the expansion of existing businesses. Obviously, it's general language. Most statements in a POCD are. I mean, we think that gives you some language that you can find this proposal is consistent with, because it will allow a good, successful business to make a change that's important to modernize and update its operation, to comply with state law, and to be safer, but in a way that we've tried to be consistent with the overall zoning scheme and the goals of the POCD. And so, if you do not agree with us, I would just ask at least that you not give a direct disapproval recommendation to the zoning commission, because if you do, by state law, they can only pass the zoning regulation on a 2/3 vote of all members of the commission, which obviously sort of puts a thumb on the scale in a way.
It doesn't really, there's only 6 members.
Right.
So 2/3 and a majority are the same thing.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess that's a good point.
Mr. Chairman, may I just clarify one?
Mr. Mann, over there.
Mr. Williams stated that this is a requirement. This is not a requirement. State law allows them under consumer protection. State law under consumer protection code requires them to have the prices on the pumps. It does not require them to be digital.
Oh, no, I'm
The
not
statement
claiming
was
that.
made that this is a requirement.
No, I
This is
wasn't claiming
not a requirement, so I just wanted to clarify that.
I apologize.
Again, I wasn't intending to turn this into a hearing, but since information was submitted, this is a photograph of their proposed price toppers, placed in relationship to red LEDs. And again, it's what was emailed to me and just photoshopped into that. And again, it's from an intensity standpoint. That's an existing
I
Cumberland
was gonna
Farms
say, he
with
didn't- I
red
didn't know if he said that
LED.
either. No,
An
I-
existing Cumberland Farms with
Yeah.
red LED. An existing
It was clear.
extra mark with normal price toppers. And an existing Cumberland Farms with normal price offers. I think it shows there's no visual potential distraction without the LEDs and potential visual distraction with the LEDs.
Say that again, what did you say?
Mr. Chairman, you asked for comments, so
Candles.
I have kind of a question. So if you can dial this down a couple of clicks, then we're counting on Cumberland Farms to dial it down a couple of clicks if we ask them to dial it down a couple of clicks, and that they'll keep it that way. My concern is that there were two conditions placed on approval there. One was that there be no trigger locks on the gas pumps, and there weren't any when it opened. After the CO was issued, they appeared again, and after complaints, they were taken off. That concerns me. The other thing is that the hours are from, as I remember right, 5 a.m. till midnight, and it has been complained that there was a period of time or a couple of occasions when it was open beyond those hours. And that was a condition of approval too. So I'm just a little nervous about dialing it down a couple of clicks, and I don't know, concerns.
What was the first thing you said, Alan? I'm sorry.
Trigger locks.
Which
You know
are?
what a trigger lock is? When you pump gas, there's a little thing you can
Oh,
put
yeah,
to keep
yeah.
the
I
nozzle
hate when they
open.
don't have those.
Well, they don't have it because the Conservation requirement, or Conservation Commission required they not have it so the gasoline couldn't run onto the ground.
Because of that area.
Okay, anyway, so that makes me a little apprehensive. I don't like text amendments. As a general rule, I think they're a bad idea to rewrite regulations, and in this case, for the benefit of one site, you're actually rewriting the regulations for all kinds of applications that come in the future. So if you find one that's allowed because of this text amendment, I realize this is a zoning argument, but if you find one that's allowed by this text amendment, it's very difficult to say no in the future for something that you approve now. And I don't think it's consistent with the PLCD, which is, that's my opinion anyway. And also, one thing I noticed is that you limit this to PAD sites, of
Actually,
which...
to the PAD site.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you did that on purpose, or, again, I don't mean to mince, the words, but I think it's important. Mr. Williams, in that first proposed text amendment, the underlined area says, except that in the planned area development zone only. There are more than one planned area development zones in Simsbury. So I don't know if the intent is to identify a single PAD or have this text amendment apply to all PADs.
No, it was to apply to all. I didn't know that there was more than one. I mean, I realized it may be applied to more than one property, but I thought it was just called that zone, so that if you're in that zone, no matter what property you are, this might apply to you. That was the intent.
Okay.
Well, then the last thing, while I'm giving you a rough time, that site was approved as a PAD. So my question is, where's the apartments? Now, it's true, you have 3 years to put in apartments, and where I'm confused is everybody and their uncle is running to Simsbury to build apartments, except that site, where they're pre-approved, and there aren't any. And I don't see any activity as if they're building any. So PAD gives you some privileges, okay? But I'd like to know where the apartments are. Now, you don't have to answer that now, because that isn't why you're here, but that's something that's on my mind too.
I'll be happy to answer anything you'd like if I can, if you want me to react to your comments,
Well,
or if you were done with them.
you get special bennies for a PAD, okay?
Yep.
So the town should get what we approve.
Well, those are all fair points. First thing I'd like to say is, I didn't mean to say it. I don't think I said that we claim the state regulation requires LED. I've never believed that, and I don't think I said that. So I just want to be clear, if it came across that way, then I apologize. I gave you the section of the state regulation. I can hand it up right now for you to look at. It allows black on white or white on black or LED. So because the state regulation allows it, that's why we're trying to do it, because we think it will modernize the business and it will be safer. So I just wanted to be clear about that. On the trigger locks, I have no idea why that happened. Knowing Cumberland Farms very well, though, I'm assuming it was just a local oversight, and probably the hours was the same thing. I realize you may not take my word for it, but they're not the kind of company that would do that. And with I do know somewhat about these LED things. I haven't learned about it for this application, that they have to make the adjustment at the manufacturer and then they're installed. So I'm virtually certain that it's not a situation where somebody can walk out and make a change. And obviously, whatever level is agreed to would be enforced and incorporated into their permits, so it would be enforceable by law. They're also willing even to put like a darkening film or something on the box if that works better. But that's something we could get into if we get to a sign application. As to why there are no apartments, I'm sure I don't know that. Because what I do know is that the property owner handled the original application, got it approved, and Cumberland Farms, I don't know if they're leasing or if they bought a portion of it, but Cumberland Farms, I don't believe, owns the overall site. But I haven't learned anything about that before coming in here today, but and I know Cumberland Farms doesn't develop apartments, so it would be a question to a different party. I could try to find that out from the property owner.
So that's how the site was approved. It may involve more than one apartment, but that's how it is.
No, I believe you. I just can't speak for the owner.
My comment's not going to be germane to this, but Alan, I have the opposite feeling for what's happening in other PADs, or like the Hartford, is Garden Homes? Yeah, Garden Homes is building all residential and none of the commercial. So I feel like the town's being taken advantage of.
It's the same market.
Yeah, just vice versa. Okay, so we're kind of getting off base a little bit, okay? We're here to discuss the referral from the zoning commission as it pertains to compliance with the plan of conservation and development. When I look at the plan of conservation and development, I see at least one area where I believe there's an inconsistency, and this is under the what we want to protect - community character chapter of the POCD. And in this chapter, there's a term called concept of place, or sense of place. And as it's written in the POCD, it's very difficult to quantify or put your finger on what a sense of place is. But when you see it, you know it. Okay? LED lights are not something that are natural. They're not consistent with a lot of the geography and architecture of Simsbury, and it certainly does not contribute to a sense of place. Also, the Plan of Conservation and Development refers to the document called Guidelines for Community Design, which is a design review board document, and in there's a substantial chapter on signage, and it talks about the reinforcement of the current zoning regulations for signage. No signs emitting their own light, different colors that are in concert with the character of the town. So it's my position that the LED lights don't fit in with the plan of conservation and development.
May I amplify in your comments? At least I think I am. I know if you drive around Simsbury, you don't see any neon lights. It's the same thing. It's not the same thing, but it looks the
Different
same.
technology, but it looks the same.
It's far worse.
Okay, so the neon lights aren't here because this isn't a neon light kind of town. If you want Route 10, I'm talking to the world here, if you want Route 10 to look something like it belongs in Simsbury, the rules should be a little bit different than if you want it to look like the Berlin Turnpike. And the Berlin Turnpike, they make their own decisions, but that kind of lighting, neon lights, that kind of thing, I think is more appropriate for that kind of area. We're trying to hang on to our semi-rural character here to amplify what Bill talked about, a sense of place.
Alan,
So to build a Cumberland Farms in a colonial-style building, which I think is incredibly out of scale, by the way, to build a very large colonial building, we're going to have George Washington come out and turn on the LEDs. I just see an inconsistency there that doesn't apply.
Alan, if you want to look at what it really looks like, even though it's in red, just go up to Granby Center.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and that's, you can change the color a little bit, and I appreciate that, but I have to concur with what you're saying. It changes everything.
I'm interested in the store personnel having to come out and stand next to a gas pump to change the pricing. But isn't that exactly where I stand when I pump gas? I mean, if it's unsafe for them, it's probably unsafe for me too, so.
Well, and they still have to do, according to this, they still have to change the one out on the road. So it doesn't keep them from coming out of the store.
Yeah.
That's what kind of,
Anyway,
but that doesn't matter it's not really germane to the
No, it's not.
POCD, but
I'm
the look in
the
the
long way
lights.
agreeing with Bill that I don't think it matches the POCD.
I don't think they were saying total safety. I think, I mean, just on, it's the manual labor of someone leaving the store to go out, and I mean, I can identify with them wanting to do things more efficiently. So, I mean, again, that's not the
That's
PCD.
not our
but
problem.
No, I'm just saying, I can appreciate needing to do things more efficiently, wanting to do things. I don't think that that's an argument for the POCD, though. I'm just saying, I understand where they're coming from, with that argument.
It does, as you pointed out, it does say we want to maintain a positive relationship and allow for extension and
Right.
growth. I find it hard to believe, again, and I used to make these things, that it takes that much time to change the prices. I mean, this is mostly done for consistency, so that if your minimum wage person does it wrong, you're not hanging with the wrong price. It's more for consistency, I think, than actual time saving. But I need everyone to know that the concept of LED technology is far more extreme than neon. I don't know if you guys are aware, but now LED lights are being marketed as paramilitary equipment that can stun and disable people. It's so bright. So without any objective quantification as to what we're getting into, we're leaving ourselves open for, I think that not create glare beyond the property lines or create a danger to vehicular traffic is just not sufficiently worded. And one other little question I want to raise is on sign prohibitions, and this is zoning, so maybe we have nothing to say about this, but it says signs are prohibited if they have flashing, rotating, or other forms of intermittent lighting. The prohibitions in this subsection shall not apply to the price display signs, meaning the day could come that they flash, rotate, and say, "Eat at Joe's," for all I know. And so
Or at another site.
Well, that's
I
what
don't know if that's part of our jurisdiction or not.
Holly, that's what they do in Granby. They don't do it, well, I'm sure they're regulated by what they can actually put on these. What I think is a real shame is that when this went forward, that they didn't include other technologies. Like if this was an LCD display, I think I would have a completely different opinion. I understand what they're saying where they're trying to simplify things, but LCD is not, it's right there in the pumps. We all see it when the.
It's not allowed by the state regulation.
But that's unfortunate. That
Okay,
that's
let's not,
Yeah, we
okay,
can't
that's
get
fine.
into the
But-
state.
But I just want to pose a question to Mr. Williams. Do you want to respond to Ms. Bem's comment about rotating, or what's the other term?
Well, this is right from our code. We're going to say it doesn't apply.
Yeah, but what,
Flashing, rotating, or other forms of intermittent lighting.
Okay, so you felt compelled to make a text amendment to that paragraph. Can you explain why?
Sure. I can tell you we're not going to use the LED poppers to stun anybody, and they're not going to say "Eat at Joe's." And the reason...
Not today.
The reason for 7D is because it prohibits signs which allow light to project through the face. So that's what we were going for. We were trying to say, okay, you can't have a sign that can project light if it is the sign that we described in H above it. And you're right, generally, most towns have allowed Cumberland Farms to have LED pump toppers where the price changes every few seconds between Smart Pay, which is 10 cents off every gallon if you use the app on your phone, and regular. They're not proposing that in Simsbury, so that was not the intent, and I'm certain they wouldn't mind if the zoning commission was otherwise inclined to approve this, if the language was changed to make it clear that it's not an exception to the flashing or rotating, because we're not going to be asking to do that in Simsbury. It's a good question, because that's not clear from the way the text amendment is proposed. I'm glad you brought that to my attention.
Mr. Rabbit?
Just again, a reminder that it's a text amendment general to property in the community. It's not a text amendment for Cumberland Farms. So Cumberland Farms is the applicant. Ownership changes over time. Properties develop over time. You're not always dealing, contract zoning is legal in Connecticut. In some aspects, it would be nice if you could enter into that and enter into a contract, and the contract would be void if someone didn't follow it. But Connecticut has said you can't do that. And that makes it difficult in some aspects with regards to enforcement, because you're talking about zoning. If someone violates the regulations, it's a knock on the door to ask them to comply, but ultimately, you need to realize zoning's power only comes from the court system. And if a landowner chooses to intensify the lighting, it's a notice of violation, it's a fine, but ultimately, compliance needs to be ordered by a judge. And that is extremely expensive. To get someone to turn, and it's not just, it's in general, it's not just the Cumberland Farms of this subject matter.
Yeah.
It's understanding the enforcement process on any regulatory change. If someone chooses not to comply, and I'm not making a suggestion that Cumberland Farms is not going to comply. This is general to the regulations. It could be a gas station 1,000 feet down the road and a pad. It would be allowed. It would be allowed to have pump toppers if this was in the regulations. And if they choose not to comply with an approval, it requires enforcement action. And ultimately, if they ignore the enforcement action, it requires litigation and a court action.
Jamie, so from what I'm understanding, that if this is only for a PAD, if, for example, Gibbs Mobile decides they want to reconfigure their pumps in such a way that they want to use the LED, that would not apply because it's not a PAD.
Correct.
So in...
What if Gibbs
Hang on, let me finish my thought process. So in the POCD, one of the things, and I'd have to dig around to figure out exactly what it is, but it talks about being business friendly. This is really not business friendly because the only gas station that we have on a PAD is Cumberland Farms.
At the present time.
Correct.
I think the difficulty you have over time, and again, I've had discussions with Mr. Williams when he was formulating this, is if you're making changes, make them modest in nature and limited in scope. And I think that's what he attempted to do, that it would not be able to be generally applied to the entire community. With that discussion, to your point, Ron, there is always the ability for someone to come back and say, well, why was it so special for a PAD to get this? What makes them different and their location to me, other than they're in a PAD, but it's still a standalone gas station. And I'm a standalone gas station, but behind me is an apartment complex, and to the left of me is a house, and to the right of me is commercial. It's not a pad, but if you look at it in its nomenclature, it's similar, but it has separate zoning. But again, the take for Mr. Williams' attempt to change the regulations was to be limited in scope and narrow in scope, so that this issue wouldn't be broad brushed where anyone on Hot Meadow or anyone in the community could take advantage of this. So it was targeted based on discussions with staff for the PADs to, again, limit that at this point in time. But the argument could be made of, if it's good for that gas station, why isn't it good for my gas station? And I don't, again, it would come back to you as a planning commission, and if you approved it in one location, how would you judge the next application for what you're grappling with?
That's going back to Alan's point.
Anybody can make any argument they want, but the zoning commission ultimately has to decide whether it would make a legislative determination to amend the text or amend a zone on property, and nobody can claim precedent on that kind of application. Our court's been very clear about that. So even if they came in and said, well, it's not fair, you allowed it for a pad, the commission might have reasons for why it doesn't want to change the regulations, doesn't want to expand it to somebody else, and it can't be forced or convinced that it has to, cite precedent or follow precedent. So that's true. Somebody could try to make that kind of argument. That's true for any change you might make to the regulations or for anything that already exists in your regulations, but it doesn't do you any good, I know, from being the applicant.
Any other discussion? Jamie, anything to add? You're all set?
Just with regards to, statements were made about consistency with the POCD by Mr. Williams with regards, yes, there are references in the POCD to business-friendly and economic development. But I think there are more references in the POCD to developing a sense of place and community character and being beholden to Simsbury and what Simsbury is versus, I think the reference was made either by Alan or Ron that, Route 10, and this happens to be on Route 10, is not the Berlin Turnpike. And there are more appropriate uses in other areas that some communities aspire to be like Simsbury, and there's a reason for that. And is Simsbury aspiring to be like, the POC references places like Chester and Essex. Are you aspiring to be more like that? Or are you aspiring to be more like Bloomfield? Excuse me, not Bloomfield, the Berlin Turnpike. The POCD doesn't make any references to aspiring to the look, feel, and sense of place of the Berlin Turnpike. They make references to places as nice as Simsbury, or the perception that they're nicer. With regards to architecture and nomenclature, and some of that is signage. It is signage. And I absolutely respect the fact that Mr. Williams is here representing his client, trying to get a sign that is not allowed under the regulations, and as stated, I think, fair reasons for his stance and his client's stance. But ultimately, the Planning Commission has to make a recommendation to zoning with the reference to 8-3A.
Anyone want to take a stab at a motion?
Well, so I believe the sense of the commission is that we're not going to go for this. I'm not positive of that, but is it better to pose a positive motion and not support it, or is it better to?
That is a decision you need to make if you're...
But there's no problem.
There's no way, if you made a motion that, you can make a motion to find that it is consistent, or you can make a motion that it's not consistent.
Okay, that's easy. Well, I'll try.
We'll give you help.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'd like to suggest a motion that we find this particular referral 8-3A from the zoning commission calling for a text amendment on the Cumberland Farms property is not consistent with the plan of conservation and development, in particular with the references to maintaining the character of the community.
Sense of place.
I was going to say,
Sense of
the word
place.
sense of place.
And
Yeah.
sense of place. That cover it?
Also, the POCD does reference the Design Review Board's document guidelines for community design, makes reference to acceptable types of signage and lighting of the signs. Again, which is inconsistent with the referral that we're discussing today.
What section of the POCD? Is that all still part of sense of place?
Yeah, it's actually what we want to protect.
Gotcha.
Community character.
I'm just saying the sign thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
I second.
so Alan made the motion, Holly seconded. Any discussion from the commissioners?
Where in the POCD is the mention of the signage?
Okay, so that's under the goals, policies, and objectives. So it's number 3. Policy, continue to include the design review board in local land use issues and continue to implement the guidelines for community design.
I want to include that in
Yeah, I'd like to have that in the motion, the reference to the community, or guidelines for community design.
So do we make a motion
It's a tough thing.
on the amended?
She's good.
No, it was,
Okay,
it was kind of just all put together.
okay.
Janice, you're up to speed? Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor
The negative.
of the negative referral, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the negative referral? Any abstentions to the negative referral? And it's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay. Next on the agenda, update on the POCD update.
Mr. Chairman, we, as I reported earlier, a few weeks ago, we did do the RFQ.
Yep.
We received 4 responses this past Friday. We're going through those responses. They range in potential costs between $50,000 and $120,000, so they're all within our $130,000 budgetary items. What I would like to do with the chairman's cooperation is work with a subgroup of the planning commission, a representative from the zoning, perhaps Mr. Ryan as the chairman of zoning, and come up with a few individuals to review those proposals and give staff some direction with the potential to interview 2, or perhaps all 3, and then make a decision.
So this consultant is dealing with the POCD,
Yes.
and we're asking zoning just to give us their 50 cents on who we should hire,
Yes.
even though they're not writing the POCD.
Even though they are not writing, but they are,
Because
they
it's
are
the
one of
next thing to
the,
do.
they are the, the difficulty with the split planning and zoning commission is you're the author and they're the implementing agency.
Okay.
So to include them early on, I believe is important, because you could write the best plan in the world, but that if they're not on board or have a little bit of skin in the game or buy-in, again, they're that implementing agency. It's easier when you're
Another reason.
planning and zoning and you put the planning hat on and then you adopt your plan and then within 6 months you're evaluating what you're going to implement. You're asking someone else.
That's the way
to
it was
implement.
done last time, too. They actually had workshops with 2 or 3.
And again, as we go forward, workshops combine, bringing conservation in, but I think it may be important if you see there's value into it and at least perhaps involving the chairman if he's available early on.
Does it matter as far as whether you're a seated member or an alternate, as to whether you're involved in that vetting process?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should reach out to the other commissioners that aren't here.
I mean, I don't know if, I know that Mr. Rice is very interested. I don't know if
Absolutely.
anyone is interested in.
For sure.
I'm interested.
Do you have a number in mind, Jamie? 2, 3, 4?
I mean, it's really at your discretion. You could decide it's all 5 regular members or it's the whole commission. It's just coordination of, we're under a tight time frame.
Yep.
So keeping it small allows us to be flexible and move perhaps a little bit quicker.
I wouldn't-
There's no intent by staff to not include anyone. It's just timing. And again, I think if the chair and perhaps another, along with, I'm also suggesting Mr. Cook as the town's head administrator, well as Mr. Ryan, so that we can have a small subgroup to say, okay, we read the 3 proposals, we think all 3 merit coming in at this date, or we really only like 1, and we would like staff, I'll report back to the commission, I'm very comfortable with it, and I'd like staff to start negotiating with that 1. They're all potentially 3 very qualified individuals. They come
3
from...
or 4?
3.
Oh, I thought you said 4.
Sorry, 3.
I don't have a problem with giving Bill the discretion to appoint somebody. Maybe people don't agree with that, but I don't have a problem with that.
When would we start doing the reviews?
Potentially next week.
Next week. We have a couple people on the commission that aren't here. Let me reach out to them. Okay, I'll just send a note to everybody.
Get a list and appoint.
Yeah, and I'll ask who's interested, but then I do ask the commission to indulge me in making an appointment. That'd be okay?
Yeah. May I suggest too that having done reviews, RFPs, and if it gets too big, it gets a little unwieldy.
Understood.
Yeah, so.
My plan would be to have myself and 1 other.
Yeah, especially if we're going to do, and because I agree with you, I think zoning and in Mr. Cook, we're going to be involved in the writing, of it anyway, so, but I think it's better if you have.
This plausible deniability, you can always blame the chairman.
That's right. That's a good point.
So maybe someone should make a motion to capture this.
Give you the authority.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we're giving the chairman the authority to appoint an interested party, and along with himself, to be part of the vetting process of the, however many it is, companies looking to.
I think we should be
Consult
more
with that.
specific. I think we're giving him discretion to choose a member of the planning commission,
Good.
As opposed to.
as opposed to anybody, so I would just.
Down the street.
Yeah.
I'll change that we're giving the chairman, Mr. Rice, the authority to appoint a sitting member of the planning commission to the vetting committee for the POCD consultant in 2016. And soon.
I'll second that.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, unanimous vote. Thank you, commissioners, appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we did require them to be sent to us digitally, so I will send them out to commission members, so if you peruse through them and perhaps have a, quick thought or something, either send it to me or the chair, and we'll try and take your input. But again, I appreciate your comments of trying to be a little leaner and respond quickly.
Very good. That's good news, Jamie, thank you. We're gonna have to pick that up. I know we still have this 80 Climax Road's getting drawn out a little bit. But I think our next big thing will be the POCD update.
Well, it looks like we can devote our next meeting to discuss your early findings,
Yep.
because
Yes, that'd be my
the
input.
Climax Road won't be ready, so,
Right.
That'd be great.
yeah.
Do you foresee things like Saturday workshops and that for POCD? I know nobody wants that. Last time there was plenty of that, but.
That's all part of scoping or developing the final scope. We have a tight time frame. November of 2017 is our deadline, but we have to back out 65 days from that.
Right.
So we're actually back to, say, September 1st. So I need a final draft, June, July. You don't meet in August, so it's like we either do it in June or July, or we really slip. And I would like to have a final draft locked up June or July, which gives us 11 months. So if we do public outreach, it's got to be multiple and early, and the discussions are, what are the previous successes? Is it a Saturday workshop? everybody's, we're paid staff, but we're typically, I won't say I don't work weekends, but it seems I do. But there are 52, I do, as a family member, appreciate the fact that there are 52 Saturdays in a year.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'd like to avoid all that for staff.
So again, there are other ways with social media and, monkey survey and doing things online. Instead of having one session where 50 people come to, we can do monkey survey, keep it up for a month. And
Isn't that Survey Monkey?
Survey Monkey, sorry. Survey Monkey. Well, it depends. In small communities, I've been very successful doing that, where, of 1,000 households, we've gotten responses out of 400. So when you're getting 30,
It automatically
40% responses, I know I had one project in a very small community that the amount of responses we got survey-wise literally almost blew our budget, because we expected 50 to 100 responses and we got 300. So to evaluate those, we didn't use digital survey there, we actually did them in the library and everything. And then to crunch the numbers on Excel spreadsheet for 300 surveys, and then we had 10 open-ended questions, and trying to put 300, which turned out to be 3,000 open-ended questions into categories was a mistake I won't make again from a budgetary standpoint. Or, again, we have digital resources that are available. It's $26 a month to be a member of a digital survey group. And it's even cheaper if we do it for the year.
And it automatically.
And it's automatic. It creates the graphs, the tables, you can update. You also can prevent someone from loading the box by only allowing one IPO address to submit it, so you can't have someone that constantly load the box, and we've had that. Any survey I've been involved in, we always numbered our surveys, and it was interesting, on occasion we'd get 20 number 6s. Someone made an awful lot of copies and distributed them, or that someone filled out 20 surveys with the number 6 on it. And what we do with that capability is we would look at all the answers to the number 6 responses. In some instances, we would find that the ballot was stuffed, and others, someone was very passionate and made copies and distributed them to their neighborhood. So it works both ways. So again, I think a lot of it's you may do a Survey Monkey and figure we only got 100 hits, so we better do something else. One or two workshops is probably germane to the subject matter of having a kind of interactive session of. It's hard when you ask a question, what do you like about Simsbury? But if someone's at a meeting and you start a conversation, people, it's free-flowing and it's organic and people talk more. So I think it's a combination. I don't think you can be devoid of having maybe one session, but I know the last time it was a 4 or 5 year endeavor. It was session after session after session.
I went to almost all of them. Yeah.
And it's difficult to build consensus if you continually have a different target market.
It was done that way in an effort to build consensus. Okay, I think it just tired everybody out.
And I think that, to me, you have a very...
Reach consensus.
You have a very comprehensive plan in place. And this, to me, is, unless something comes out different during the process, this is truly an update of that comprehensive plan. It's not a redo. It's an update. You have
Last
some
time
very...
it was a redo.
Yeah, you have some very good guiding principles in there. And I think when you're seeking public input, you're going to be looking at whether those guiding principles are still germane to the community. And maybe, Bill's mentioned it before, the mix of housing and how that potentially could, I see that as a potential issue of great discussion.
I found it a bit too general and repetitive, and how do you measure? Like, there was nothing in the POCD. I said, well, I have notes. Was this measured? Was this done? Because how do we,
The big fight was metrics. Last time.
Okay.
Huge fight.
It's always.
If there would be metrics for something.
With the new requirements under
That would
state
never
statute, you're supposed to
Yes.
build metrics into it,
Yeah.
so I know some of the consultants who are doing them are actually adding tables at the end of the documents to determine responsibilities for certain goals and objectives. And over time, you go back to the table and you check the boxes. Was it accomplished? Wasn't it accomplished? Almost like if we had this in the previous plan, we could go back and say, let's check the boxes. Let's go back to that last appendix, say, did we do this? Did we do this? How we make out here? Some of the objectives in here were accomplished. You do have form-based codes in place. You do have stringent design review standards. But how are they working?
Yeah, just like we would recommend to the watershed, like all the NRs, was that ever done? There were things like that it just...
So again, this is an update of some general principles, and I think also you can take some of those general principles and say, do we need to target those?
Can you do anything form-based like in a POCD? Meaning that when I sat through zoning and we did all this stuff, there was a lot made about you can have pictures. You can say that this area we envisioned this way. And it gave you pictures of density.
Absolutely, you can build that in.
See, to me, that helps a lot with the generality of it. If you say we picture this as a semi-rural town anymore, okay, well, what is a semi-rural town? This is what we think of when we see semi-rural as part of town.
And again, there's some general discussions of that in page 50 through 100 in your existing plan about transects and form-based code. And again, that was a general guiding principle, and you may want to go from the 100,000 foot level down to 10,000. And
with pictures,
we potentially can do that.
Okay.
Jimmy, you mentioned using digital media for such as electronic survey. Would a Facebook page be a good way to get input? Would it be too wide open?
Or a lot of times when we're doing POCDs, we develop a separate POCD web page where people, that's where the surveys, it's not buried on the town's webpage. It's, you go to the town's first page and there's an immediate link to POCD. And you go to the POCD and you create a whole page for the POCD. Survey, link Facebook, update status.
Might be
and
cheaper
you start
to
to do it that way.
I don't know what our budget is for. I
Right now we have in our budget is $130,000. That was kind of my ceiling. I was hoping to potentially be around 80 to 90, and then it's POCD money. It could be writing the plan and also potential implementation money, where if we can't get to the 10,000 foot level on some things, we could use those additional resources where the plan makes a suggestion to target an area, and then we use the additional funds to then target that area as a result of the POCD. Or halfway through the POCD, you could take a slight deviation and bring someone on to target an area.
Does the budget include actually producing printing, distributing?
I'd still like a hard copy of all that.
No, everyone's like, oh, well, only put $1,000 in there because everyone's going to put it on the webpage. Believe me, people love. This
hard
goes
to
on
do
the
it,
shelf,
yeah.
but to hand someone a product, because you're not going to...
Can't always get on a computer.
You're going to blow up your inkjet at home. It's printing that, so.
Great, thank you. Any new business, any correspondence?
None.
Okay.
Going to make a motion to adjourn?
I second.
Any discussion?
Do it.
I just, again, thank you all for being a great commission. I think...
It's all Patterson's.
Yeah, why not? Okay. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, and good night.
Yeah, thank you.